Hi, I'm Will Wilson, and I'm a photographer and artist based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and in Austin, Texas, where I teach. I'm associate professor of photography and media there. But you're in my studio now in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm a Diné photographer. I'm also Irish and Welsh. And my work is mostly about sort of that combination of things in some ways: photographer, native, uh, non-native, and thinking about representation and just historically how Indigenous people have been represented through photography, speaking back to that history, and then also creating sort of a new version of it. It was originally framed around sort of my work in conversation with Edward S. Curtis, who was a photographer who sort of straddled the 19th and 20th centuries. But from 1907 to 1930, he did a well-known project called the North American Indian. I framed it as a conversation with Curtis because of that sort of well-known body of work. I think in a lot of ways, even today, most Americans sort of have those historic images in mind when they think about Native folks in the United States today. And so I wanted to sort of, in some ways, continue that conversation, but shift it as well, give voice to Indigenous folks today. And, think about the history of photography, the history of Native America, and also not everybody in the exhibition is Indigenous, right? The project is actually much broader than that. Um, it is framed as a conversation with Edward Curtis, who was a 19th century photographer who made beautiful work. I will say I'm sort of enamored with some of those images and also the process. Um, I hope on some level people think a little critically as well about sort of that project and how my work is a bit of an intervention in that history. Most of the people who are imaged in my part of the exhibition are, very modern people who are doing amazing, interesting things today. Yeah, so collaboration is sort of at the center of the project. It's really about, how do we come together, slow things down in a digital age with this historic photographic process and make an image together. I invite people to come and sit, bring significant objects or tell significant stories. It's important for me that the sitters have a say in how they're represented. Part of that is me thinking back to that history of photography of Indigenous folks. And, I think a number of people who made images of Native Americans, like in the, late 19th, early 20th century, had a very specific sort of image of the quote unquote Indian in mind, right? I'll have to basically send a dark room to wherever I go, and usually some pretty strong lights because the emulsion is, if this means anything to you, it's about an ISO zero point 0.5. So most modern cameras start at like 100. So it's not very sensitive. And then we'll invite folks to come and have their portrait done. And that usually takes about 30 minutes to sort of begin a dialogue, to do some framing. I invite people into the dark room to see the making of the film. And then we make the image. The reason that it's called wet plate is because the emulsion has to stay wet the entire time. If it dries out, you do not get an image. So you have to bring a darkroom with you wherever you go. And that also enables this amazing kind of possibility for sharing and sharing the process. So I invite people to come into the darkroom with me and watch the development of their tintype. And then when you first see the image comes up as a negative image. And then you rinse it off with water to stop the development, and you put it in fixer. And when you put it in fixer, this amazing sort of phase change occurs where it goes from a negative image to a positive image. And you can actually turn on the light for that part. And, I've had people like brought to tears or give me bear hugs or punch me just because they're like so amazed at witnessing this sort of transformation happen. So it's really important to me that, you walk away with your own original tintype if you participate. I mean, in some ways, it is the actual physical trace because the lights are falling off of you or the subject and they're going into the camera and making a chemical change to the emulsion that's on the plate. I get a digital facsimile of that goes into this broader archive of portraiture, but the sitter actually walks away with this sort of material register of like their experience. I really enjoy doing 19th century processes because, you know, it's handmade photography. It's sort of bringing back the material and perhaps even the material intelligences that exist in collaboration with the maker. Slowing things down, making your own film, playing with silver and the emulsion that you create and the different developers. So it's a great way to sort of engage that history as well. I really hope that visitors who see the exhibit, sort of think about photography and its power to tell stories. Um, and to also think about maybe the individual stories that are behind each of these portraits, right? We all carry these amazing histories and stories with us, and part of the project is about sort of pointing to some of that and making an image based on it and sharing that. I mean, I hope people think a little more critically too about sort of these images, especially of Indigenous folks. Um, the first image in Curtis's portfolio, entitled The Vanishing Race, showed a bunch of Indigenous folks kind of walking off into the sunset. And, that's very much not the case. People are thriving in Indigenous nations across the country, and hopefully that's represented in the exhibition. I hope you also have an opportunity to download the Talking Tintype app that I worked on in collaboration with Digital Amp Media. And there is a really cool sort of synthesis of 19th and 21st century imaging and storytelling technologies there. You get the app, and certain images, you can scan the image and the person will come alive and sort of tell their story on your device. And for me, that's a really important outcome for this project in practice, like figuring out how to do that and keeping it sort of sustainable, just enabling people to tell their own stories in a way.